All right, here we go. Welcome into the Stone Shield Show. We are here. We are live. It is Thursday, February 26, 2026. Exciting show on tap here today. Got to talk some Cincinnati Bengals. More stuff has come out from the NFL Combine. Al Golden spoke with some local members of the Cincinnati Bengals media. They've got some good stories up on their respective sites. We're going to break down some of those comments and the phrase force multiplier. We heard a lot from Duke Tobin. Heard it a lot from Zach Taylor. Heard it some from Al Golden there as well. That seems to be the phrase of the offseason for Cincinnati. Force multiplier. I think I'm a force multiplier. Are you a force multiplier out there as well? We're definitely going to take that and run with it, as we're going to say it all offseason long here at the show. But I get it. You're looking for a guy that can elevate the play of the guys around him. And when you enter him in as a piece of the whole, makes everybody better. And I think that's what they mean by force multiplier. But we'll talk about force multipliers, some potential force multipliers that Cincinnati could add to this roster, and of course some guys that they have in place that they feel good about coming back on the defensive side of the football, as I think Duke Tobin, Zach Taylor, and Al Golden shed a little bit of light into some of those players that they believe fit that bill. Also, Cincinnati Reds played again yesterday. They're playing again today. Chase Burns gets the ball once again. We saw him get the ball in the opener for spring training in the Cincinnati Reds, but Dolo Day was yesterday. It went well, as things typically do when Nick Lodolo is out there and he's healthy. Couple of innings, 4 Ks, and I would assume some nasty stuff. Obviously, it wasn't on TV, so don't really. There are some clips out there circulating, some of the home run stuff. We've got some stuff over on our Twitter page and on our social media there as well, so check it out if you haven't seen it. But I would assume Dolo was nasty, throwing that back foot slider, and like I said, if he's healthy, you feel pretty good about where this rotation is for the Cincinnati Reds. The Reds played long ball yesterday a couple of times. That ultimately was the difference in the ball game as they win 3-2, and guys that they're expecting to contribute this year, certainly with Sal Stewart. And then J.J. Bleday is off to a red-hot start to the spring. I've got some thoughts on him. By no means a roster lock. Certainly competing for one of the final roster spots, probably with a fellow left-hander in Will Benson. But he's hot to start camp, and he hit the ball over the fence 464 feet. Like, that's not just barely getting over. That's a towering blast. That's a moonshot. I'm excited about J.J. Bleday. I know we kind of laughed, rolled our eyes a little bit when they made the signing, but if you do a little bit of a deep dive and do a little bit of research on this guy, find out who he is, where he played in college, how good he was that final year at Vanderbilt, and then you kind of start to make some excuses for him as to why things maybe haven't translated to the pros as well as many people thought when he was a top 5 draft pick. Well, he was in Oakland, right? I think you put some good players out in Oakland. That's a difficult place to play when you don't really have many people in the stands. You're one of the worst teams in baseball, and pretty clear organizationally, top to bottom. You're not really in the business of trying to win games. So that's not the easiest place to go and try to play at, right, and compete at. Maybe I'm just making an excuse for him, but I've got some hope and optimism surrounding J.J. Bleday. We'll talk Red Legs. Jake Trotter, ESPN.com, senior college football writer, is going to be joining us. Looking forward to talking to Jake at about 11:30, coming up in about 25 minutes. Going to be talking to him about the college football playoff, expansion, Cincinnati suing former quarterback Brendan Sorsby. Going to ask him some questions related to that. Also some Cleveland Browns stuff. I know we're here in Cincinnati. We don't care for the Cleveland Browns, but divisionally, it makes sense to keep an eye on what they're doing up in Cleveland. Could Deshaun Watson potentially play in Week 1 for the Cleveland Browns as their starter? What in the world is Andrew Berry doing, taking 2 quarterbacks, Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders? And how about the Todd Monken hire? Things that we're going to ask Jake Trotter here in about 25 minutes. Jake Trotter, ESPN. Stick around for that. Also, a trade was made at the NFL Combine. It can't be official until the new league year in March, but Adam Schefter reporting there's going to be a swap between the Jets and the Titans. Tavondre Sweat, former second-round pick for Tennessee, he's going to New York. Jermaine Johnson is on his way to the Tennessee Titans. Obviously, Bob Saleh was his coach with the New York Jets a few years ago, and with a defensive-minded head coach, you knew he was going to attack, trying to beef up that defense. He gets a former player, clearly had a good relationship with in New York, and they pair him with Jeffrey Simmons there on the edge. I think this could impact the Cincinnati Bengals. Does that mean you go in a different direction if you're the Tennessee Titans? If one of those edge guys is there at 4, what if you say, you know what, we want to get Carnell Tate here to help out our young quarterback in Cam Ward? I think that now becomes a possibility for the Tennessee Titans. We'll talk about that. The Chicago Bears, are they actually leaving Chicago? I think it's gaining some momentum here, and if I'm the NFL, I'm doing everything in my power to get involved and make sure the Chicago Bears aren't leaving Chicago, right? It's not like the Kansas City Chiefs thing, like they're going across the border or whatever. Chicago's one of the biggest, I'm not going to say best, been there a few times, enjoyed it, but one of the biggest, most proud, famous cities in the United States. You want the Chicago Bears to be playing football in Chicago, not Indiana. Right, so we'll talk about that a little bit at the end of today's show. Also, if we have some time, ESPN a couple of days ago put out a college basketball piece about some different teams and schools that could potentially have openings. And we were talking about Travis Steele leaving Miami yesterday, and you look at some of these schools that are going to become open probably. I mean, Arizona State, right? Love Miami to death. Alma mater, right? If Arizona State comes calling and wants you to be their next head basketball coach, you're going to pass up on that? How about within your own state, Ohio State, Columbus comes calling? You're going to go back to Miami when you could go to Columbus? We'll see. We're going to see his loyalty tested here, but obviously he is solely focused on winning games here in Miami, getting to the tournament, hopefully winning a couple of games there as well. But if we have time, we'll talk about that a little bit on today's show. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're right on the doorsteps to 22,000 subscribers. Got you covered here with all Cincinnati sports. Got you covered here on my show from a more national perspective there as well. But Red season, it's here. Opening days in a few weeks. Obviously, nobody does it like the city of Cincinnati. Maybe there'll be a live show somewhere for Chatterbox Reds. Don't want to get carried away there, but could be in the cards. Regardless, there will be content every single day here at Chatterbox. We'll talk about the Reds on my show. Nick Kirby, Craig Sandlin, Mike Hart, and others. Trace Fowler got you covered with Chatterbox Reds. So exciting time of the year. You look at this division in the Central, it's going to be a competitive division. We've talked about how the Pirates are kind of coming on as a team that a lot of people are hyping. The Cubs are going to be really good. We know this. We understand this. The Brewers, they should regress, but we've been saying that for years, and they continue to win mass baseball games. So I would imagine that's going to continue. You would think the Cardinals are going to be terrible this year, but the Cardinals, of course, have always had success against the Reds. So really intriguing MLB season on the horizon, specifically here in the NL Central. And I think the Reds, they're 85-plus wins. That, to me, is the expectation. Go out there, win some games. Don't put yourself in a situation where you need a borderline miracle to backdoor your way into the wild card. Go out there and try to compete for the division. I think you're good enough to do it with some of the acquisitions and signings and trades, of course, with Dane Myers that Cincinnati made this offseason. So pretty hyped for opening day just around the corner. But make sure you like the stream, like the video if you see it come out on YouTube later in the day. Follow us on social media. Follow me. Follow the show at StoneShields_ is the Twitter handle. Follow the show at the Stone Shields there as well. Jake Trotter coming up, ESPN, in about 20 minutes. Let's start with the Cincinnati Bengals. Force multipliers. That is kind of the buzzword or buzzwords for the Cincinnati Bengals here at the NFL Combine. We've heard it used before, right? But they were really using it at the Combine. And by they, I'm talking about Duke Tobin, Zach Taylor, and Al Golden there as well. Talked about on yesterday's show how Duke basically came out. He didn't say it directly, but he basically came out and said, yeah, you can forget trading for Max Crosby or making some crazy signing Jalen Phillips, right, in free agency, trading for a different star pass rusher, maybe even a situation what the Jets did earlier this morning. Not happening, right? Jets and the Titans there, of course, not happening for the Cincinnati Bengals. He may as well have come out and said that. However, they are looking for force multipliers. And to me, when I think force multiplier, I think what they mean is a guy that can come in and help elevate the group around him and essentially make the team better when he's out on the field, right? We talk about plus minus in basketball. When you're on the floor and your plus minus is plus 20, like, oh my goodness, you're a better team when that particular player's on the floor. They're looking for good plus minus guys. Plus guys that can come in and contribute. It might not be a superstar, but can be a force multiplier. So I think the Bengals' plan here this offseason is becoming more clear from the outside, certainly. And I think we could have guessed it, but, we held on to some hope that they'd be really aggressive, make a big trade, make a big signing. That's not going to happen. Restructure for Joe Burrow, by the way, probably not going to happen either. But there's areas of their defense that they feel really good about. For whatever reason, there's some guys that show that they can't play competent football, that the Bengals are still holding on to hope that can make some jump in year 3. Did see a year 3 jump from Myles Murphy this past year. That's fair. But there's some guys that they have in place that they feel really, really good about. And Al Golden alluded to this, as did Zach Taylor and Duke Tobin. I think the key here to this operation is Myles Murphy. And Al Golden was talking about this yesterday with some of the beat reporters here in Cincinnati. And he was like, if you sit Myles down in this room and ask him, can you be a 1? He would say yes. If he asked me being Al Golden, if he can be a 1, I would say yes. And if he asked Jerry Montgomery, the defensive line coach, if he could be a 1, I would say yes. So I don't have a reason to be concerned or nervous about Myles Murphy being kind of a bust this coming year, right? The proof is in the pudding. We saw it this past year, and it wasn't just a one-game thing. He put together a really good stretch, a really good season of football, and there's reason to believe that he can come in and be a winning player. That's why I'm so hesitant to, say Shamar Stewart's going to be good, because he wasn't good in college and he wasn't good as a rookie. So why should he just magically be good, right? Myles Murphy really struggled the first 2 years, but last year he was a really good football player, right? And he looks like a clear 2 in the National Football League. Now the question is, can he become a 1? And his development is going to be crucial, because you talk about Trey Hendrickson more than likely being out the door, them not trading for some, superstar guy like a Max Crosby, sitting there at 10, Bailey and Reese going to be off the board. Is Bain off the board there as well? Perhaps you're not going to be able to bring in some outstanding guy. Hopefully you can draft a guy well that can come in and contribute. But if Myles Murphy can be a true 1, that totally changes things for you defensively, right? Because he was able to apply some pressure on the quarterback, which was great. Get home in the backfield, that was great. But he also was solid against the run, which to me is the most intriguing part of his game. Talk about this a lot with Trey Hendrickson. Great closer, great pass rusher. He doesn't do anything in the run. He ain't setting the edge, right? There's not many tackles for a loss that aren't sacks, right, for Trey Hendrickson. I think it can be a little bit different for Myles Murphy, and there's reason to be excited about the season that he could potentially have here in 2026. He's a huge key to this defense for Cincinnati. Jordan Battle, right? All 3 guys, Duke, Zach, and Al, really love Jordan Battle. And I was a big Jordan Battle guy in college. I was excited when the Bengals drafted him. I remember exactly where I was when they made that pick. I was very happy that the Bengals drafted Jordan Battle. And there's been some highs and there's been some lows from him. But the Bengals are choosing to key in on those highs, and clearly he is a piece of this team, certainly this year. But I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to move on with him beyond this year and potentially extend him at some point. Wouldn't anticipate that this offseason, but clearly this staff has a lot of love for Jordan Battle. Now the question becomes, who's his running mate going to be, right? Because it's not going to be Geno Stone, and there's a lot of free agent safeties that are going to be out there and be available. Bengals have always devalued that position in free agency, and of course there's a guy named Caleb Downs who possibly could be available at 10. And as we've talked about, as more time goes on, I start to get a little bit less optimistic that he's going to be available at that number 10 overall selection. But Al talked about him really coming into his own as a box safety, as a guy that can get down on the box, get a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, and hit some people. I did think he was really good in that role for Cincinnati last year. But he needs a guy with him that can take care of stuff on the back end, that can be that center fielder for you, because Lord knows Geno Stone couldn't be that guy. That can match up in the slot, cover some guys, right? I think from a coverage perspective, you have some concerns there with Jordan Battle. And I'll be upfront. I had said going into this offseason that I don't want to look at Jordan Battle as a starter on this team. Clearly that's not going to happen, right? They couldn't cut everybody. They had to, pick a select few that they were going to continue to roll with on defense. He's going to be one of them. I'm not up in arms about it, but I just think the safety play as a whole was so bad for Cincinnati. Maybe that's 90% Geno Stone, but I do know there were some rough moments for Jordan Battle there as well. But clearly I think the character, the age, the fact that he's played in big games, right? He went to Alabama, hasn't played in as many big games here in Cincinnati as certainly we had hoped, but he's been around the block a little bit, and apparently there's some leadership elements to his game, and that was kind of something Duke Tobin talked about a lot at his end of the season press conference at Paycor Stadium, is finding guys on the defense that could come in and be real leaders for you. And I think they really have a lot of belief in Jordan Battle kind of checking off that box, and he's going to be a guy for Cincinnati this year that's going to play a ton of snaps and have an opportunity to really dictate whether this defense has success or not. Who's his running mate going to be? That is the golden $1 million question for the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to bring somebody in free agency like a Brian Cook, right? Local guy, played at UC, a couple of Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Do you bring in a guy a little bit older than that? Bengals have always been shy to go old on the defensive side of the ball. I think the stat is in the Zach Taylor era, they've never paid a guy 30 years or older more than like $2 million, and they've only paid like one or two guys that. That's got to change this offseason. And luckily, Duke Tobin also alluded to that there as well. His quote was, "They're playing longer these days, and we're keenly aware of that." Go out and get a veteran, right? Go get a guy that has been there and done that. Zach Taylor was talking about the value of being a free agent in this league. You know what it's like. You've been around. You've played in big games. A lot of these guys have played in postseason games, right? Not everybody gets signed by the team that drafted them. Doesn't mean you're not a solid player, right? There are some benefits to going out there and being aggressive in free agency. Now, the elite teams always kind of just dip their toe into free agency a little bit. You don't want to overhaul your roster and just have a bunch of free agents on your team. That's not going to work. But I've always said with the Cincinnati Bengals, given what they do offensively as far as their salary cap, paying Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, you can afford to be like, all right, 1-year deal for this guy on defense. All right, 2-year deal for this guy on defense, and it kind of be a revolving door there, right? I think that decision, in essence, was made when you paid T. Higgins, right? I think most people thought, T, we love you, but you weren't going to be here, right? Joe Burrow put a stop to that. He said, oh, no. T. Higgins is going to be here. Now you look at two studs getting paid as receivers and your quarterbacks, one of the highest paid players in the league. Not a bunch of room to really be aggressive on the defensive side. So I'm okay with going 1-year guy here, 1-year deal guy here, 2-year deal guy here. And it was good to see Duke come out and say, you know what? We're in a spot. Guys are getting older. Let's tap into that a little bit. Something we've been banging the table, right? You want to start 2 rookie linebackers, and neither one was a first-round pick. How'd that work? And Al Golden talked about he put a lot of the blame on himself, but they were in a situation where they were asking a ton out of those guys. And think about all the times that Demetrius Knight had to try to set the edge on the line of scrimmage. That didn't work, right, at all. And Al talked about that, and he's like, well, hopefully we can get a linebacker in here that can do that, and then we can ask Demetrius to do more of the stuff that he's good at. They were asking those guys to do everything, which, we were ripping them apart, which maybe isn't fully fair to the player, but instead the organization and the coaching staff that put him in that position. Bring in a veteran. Bring in some off-ball linebacker that can help set the edge, right? Demario Davis is a guy that I keep mentioning, and I understand he's 36 years of age, right? Doesn't mean he doesn't have a solid year left in him, right? Bobby Wagner, I'm less high on him than others, right? I don't think he can move nearly as well as he used to be able to, but there's a leadership component there, and there's, ability against the run game, and it just takes some off the plate of the younger linebackers as well. And even if the Bengals take Sonny Styles, I think he is a significantly better player than Demetrius Knight and Barrett Carter, but he's also going to be a rookie too, right? And he can't just do everything out there. So bringing in a veteran, I think, is key, and hopefully one of which is a force multiplier, as these guys like to say. Leo Chenal, right, from Kansas City. Alex Anzalone, who's bounced around a little bit, recently with Detroit. Singleton, right, from Denver, is certainly another option there as well. Bring in a veteran at that linebacker spot. You cannot go, even if you draft Sonny Styles, great, I'll be excited, but you can't go in with Sonny Styles, Demetrius Knight, and Barrett Carter. Like, you have to add somebody to that room that has been there, done that, has played in the league for a long time, and is in a position to really have success and elevate this defense as a force multiplier. But did think that was kind of funny. We're going to continue to use that phrase. I know Reed Mouse is going to be excited to use that one when he makes his return. But, I get it. That's what the Bengals are looking for. I don't think anything that Duke and Zach came out and said should surprise anybody. It can disappoint you a little bit, but it's the Cincinnati Bengals. Were they going to say, oh, yeah, we're going to trade for Max Crosby, or we're going to go sign this guy in free agency, or make this huge trade where we give up multiple first-round picks? That's not how they operate. They value their picks. They don't like moving around. They like attacking mid-tier free agents. This is what they do. Now, the reason that you should be a little bit optimistic about it is they've had success doing it in the past. Now, as we've talked about with Duke Tobin, he loves to, hang his hat on, well, I've done this my whole life. I've done it forever. I know what I'm doing, right? Well, when you look at his record and you look at the team's record since he's been in charge, yeah, there's been some good moments. There's been some good seasons. There's been a Super Bowl appearance, but there's more losing than winning, And that's a large sample size. That's not just a couple years Joe Burrow was hurt. No, he's been doing this for a while, and he's been losing a heck of a lot more than he's winning. But I do believe in this thought process, in this mindset, in this game plan. There are some things that I personally would do different, right? Tagging and trading Trey. Again, we've made the joke here on the show. Is it because your department's so small that you can only handle a few select things that you can put your attention on, right? When the Bengals paid T and Jamar, they couldn't focus on the defense at all. They were like, oh, this is consuming 100% of our time. We got to focus on this, and then just neglected the defense. We were kind of joking about that, but maybe it's true. I don't know, right? Are they going to be in a situation where they can attack the things that they need to attack this offseason? They have funds. They could create more with a Joe Burrow restructure. Doesn't look like they are going to do that. But I do have belief that this can work. It's just a matter of bringing in the right guys, right, and seeing an improvement from this staff. Because you can have the excuse of, well, it was Al's first year as the DC. We're trying to install new schemes, new defenses, get these young guys up to speed. Well, that excuse isn't flying next year. And I think everybody in this city is ready for the excuses to be done. I think Joe Burrow being hurt is a legitimate excuse. I will buy that. If he's not out there, it doesn't look the same. You don't really have much of a chance. But none of this, we're just kind of getting used to this. That was your 6-11 year last year. You better hit the ground running and be ready to go with the young guys that you draft and the free agents that you bring in. And you better be ready to play competitive football in the AFC North this year. And you have an advantage. No Mike Tomlin. No John Harbaugh. Some inconsistencies certainly with Lamar Jackson. Now he's got to get used to a new head coach in Jesse Minter and a coordinator in Declan Doyle who's like basically his age, right? Which I think is a great hire for Baltimore, but it's going to be a bit of a dice roll. Cleveland, we'll talk about them in a little bit, a couple of minutes here with Jake Trotter. But you're in a position here to really have a successful year. And it's all about doing the right things over the course of the next few weeks and in free agency to put your team in the best spot. A couple of minutes here before Jake Trotter, ESPN, joins us live on the show. Do want to talk Cincinnati Reds. They pick up another win, and it's spring, and people laugh at me for getting excited about a spring training win, but I think it's the way in which they've won these past two games, where it's like it's a close one-score game, right? It's not like they're blowing teams out, and they had multiple guys that came in from the pen and delivered after a strong starting pitching performance. Obviously, these guys are only going 2 innings anyway, but a strong performance from Nick Lodolo. I think you got to be intrigued about some of the power that we've seen from Sal Stewart. Played long ball yesterday early in the game, got him going on the right foot. The guy can flat out hit. Every Reds person that we have on this show tells us that, and that gives us a lot of a reason to be excited. Was there some concern of him dropping some weight, and it's like, is he still going to have that power? The power clearly still is there, right? And that is very good for the Cincinnati Reds, and he's a little bit more mobile now. First base, I think second base really is an actual option for him at this point as kind of the backup to Matt McClain if something were to happen there. But you got to be intrigued with what Sal Stewart has been able to do to this point. Pencil him in on opening day, barring injury. And he's going to be out there and ready to go for this team. There's going to be some ups. There's going to be some downs. He's 22 years old, right? He's not just going to be an all-star, but I think Rookie of the Year clearly is in play for Sal Stewart. He's talked about it at length, how that is a goal of his. He has not been shy to go out there and say that. I do think there's some value in Sal Stewart going out there and potentially winning that award for the Cincinnati Reds. J.J. Bleday. When the Reds made the signing to bring in J.J. Bleday, I think a lot of people, because remember, this is when they were all in the process, we all wanted them to bring in a big-time bat, right? And this was, if my timeline's correct, like shortly after you missed on Schwarber, maybe a few weeks after, I don't know exactly, right? And then you wanted to, sign that guy, and there was no real buzz about Suarez at that point. So I think the Reds, as a fan base, they weren't like ticked off that they signed J.J. Bleday, but just some other big-time names had kind of been dangled in front of their face. So when they got Bleday, it was like, what was J.J. Bleday going to catapult us to winning the division? But I think there's reason to be excited about J.J. Bleday. And, there's a lot of people here at Chatterbox that are big Will Benson fans. I like Will Benson. I think Tito has kind of disrespected Will Benson. I think Will Benson's a quality player, and I've really enjoyed his time here in Cincinnati. But also, we kind of know what we have in Will Benson. He's going to strike out a lot. He's going to hit some bombs, right? He's going to have a couple cool bat flips. He's going to talk that talk a little bit too. He's going to play with that swagger. He's going to leave it all out there, right? play with his emotions on his sleeve a little bit and just leave it all out on the field. I can respect that and appreciate that. We all know he can run into a baseball there as well. But from an average WAR, all those kinds of numbers standpoints, I think you kind of know what you have, right? Is he going to have a year where he hits 300 and has, 40 bombs? Like, that's not going to happen, right? I'm not to say it's happening with J.J. Bleday, but I just kind of feel like you know what you have, and you've kind of done it a few times with Will Benson. His services are going to be needed at some point, whether it's on opening day or if somebody were to get hurt and he's in a situation where he can fill in. I got some excitement around J.J. Bleday. Now, I'm not going to pretend to be some college baseball nut, but do I watch the College World Series? Yes, right? And, if you're a college baseball, if you're a baseball fan, you take a look at what Tim Corbin, right, and the Vandy boys are doing. That's just what you do, right? And the year he had, right before he got drafted, he was drafted out of high school, and it was way late. I don't remember exactly what round it was, but made the right decision of, I'm going to Vandy. Didn't play a ton early on, didn't do much early on, but that final year at Vandy, SEC Player of the Year and the best position player on that team in 19 that won the College World Series. Jack Leiter, of course, was a freshman right arm on that team there as well. And he was a top 5 pick. I think that's what some people forget. Now, obviously, Nick Senzel was a top pick as well, and I was a huge Senzel guy, and that clearly didn't work out. And it just goes to show you the difference of top-level college baseball, i.e. the College World Series, and the bigs, right? There is a huge gap, bigger than the Grand Canyon, right, of how much more difficult it is in the bigs than it is at the highest level of college baseball. Not everybody and nobody really is Paul Skeens, right, that just dominates in college and then does the exact same thing in the pros. Doesn't really work like that. But clearly the guy can hit, and clearly the guy can hit home runs is what I'm looking at, right? And Jeff Brantley kind of alluded to this on the Reds Hot Stove yesterday there as well, and we'll kind of just read off this quote here. He said, "I hear that middle infield thing all the time. You know what? I don't want that. I'm not interested in that. You know what I want? I want a guy who can step up there in the 8th inning when I'm down by 1 run and he can tag one. That's what I want. I would imagine that's what Tito wants. If something happens to Ellie or McLean, then you go to AAA, you bring one of them up the next day. I don't want to carry somebody on my bench all year who is not going to play every day, who is not going to be a guy that can hit the ball out of the ballpark." Totally agree with Jeff Brantley here in this spot, right? Put Bleday on the roster. Do you have to play him every day? No, right? He's going to be in a platoon situation when he's out there, but he can hit the ball out of the ballpark, and he can run into a baseball. That's what I want this bench to look like for Cincinnati. Now, it's going to be a lot different. You're going to see a lot of strikeouts here with this team. We know Gino's going to strike out a bunch. He's already ran into a baseball this spring, which certainly is very exciting, and we know Ellie's going to strike out a bunch too. Right? And then if you add a guy like a Will Benson or a J.J. Bleday, there's some more strikeouts there as well. But I truly believe in this day and age of professional baseball, there's multiple different ways to win. Some of the other small market teams have shown you that, right? Milwaukee, what they do with the platoons and the pitching. Tampa Bay for several years there as well. But it is my way of thinking that if you want to have consistent success, specifically in one-run games, something the Reds, of course, have struggled at for quite some time, you got to be able to put the ball over the fence. These pitchers this day and age are so good. They are so unbelievable, and it is difficult to be able to piece 3-4 hits together and kind of mount a rally. I mean, how many times were the Reds down 2 runs late in the game, and you're like, that's too much, right? Like 1 run, okay, but you knew nobody was going to hit the ball out of the ballpark, right? And it's like you got to put together 5-6 hits to score a couple of runs against some of the pitchers that you're going up against in the late innings of a game. Very, very, very difficult to do. So I've got some optimism in J.J. Bleday. I understand his numbers from when he was in Oakland. Mentioned this in the Open, right? It's difficult to go to Oakland and play baseball, right? That's not the best card that you drew, right? Now, once they move to Vegas and maybe get some momentum there, that could change. But in Oakland, like you look at the scenes there in that park where it was like there was like 12 people there at the games, and they had a little bit more success last year. But for the most part, it's like, yeah, they'll win like 60 games. It's like that's got to be demoralizing, right? When clearly your front office doesn't care about trying to win, and it's just kind of a bunch of random guys put together out on the field, right? In a difficult division, obviously in the West there as well. So I always take that with a grain of salt when you're dealing with a team like that. I think a change of scenery is a great thing to have for a guy like J.J. Bleday, and he gets it here in Cincinnati, right? Cincinnati, a small market team there as well, but there's a lot more life here in Cincinnati. It's a baseball town, right? There's belief. They just went to the postseason. I think a change of scenery could be really good for him, and clearly this guy can play. Now, just because he's a top 5 pick, does that mean he can be a really good player for the Cincinnati Reds? I don't know. We'll see. But I do think there should be a little bit more optimism when it comes to J.J. Bleday. I mean, look what he did last night. Putting it out of the ballpark, 464 feet. I mean, that is way out of here. And there was nobody on that Cincinnati Reds team last year that really had that in their back pocket as far as something that they were capable of doing, hitting it that far out of the ballpark. All right, it is time to welcome in our guest, and it is my pleasure to introduce Jake Trotter. He is a senior college football writer at ESPN. Jake, how's it going, man? Appreciate you stopping by.
It's going well. So my first out of college was actually in Middletown, Ohio. Didn't really have a baseball team growing up, and picked up the Reds while I lived there for 2 years, and have been a fan ever since. So I listen to you guys for Red Stock, and excited about this season now that we have Suarez hitting in the cleanup role.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, I knew you did some work there in Middletown. I actually went to Lakota East High School, so we played Middletown
nice.
There in the same conference as us. But, yeah, that's pretty cool. Happy to know that you're a fan of the boys.
Almost
Trace Fallon.
got Kyle Schwarber, but
I know.
one of the Middletown greats.
I know. And then you heard Bryce Harper at the start of camp say that he thought that he was going to go to Cincinnati. So, yeah, that got dangled in front of our face a little bit. But Suarez, pretty good backup plan, I would say.
I think so. I think, listen, can't have any less power than you had last year.
Exactly. Absolutely. No doubt. Well, let's kind of dive in here. I want to spend some time talking about college football here, Jake. 12-team playoff. I think obviously it was a lot better this go-around than in year one, but still some changes that need to be made. They kind of fixed the buys. That was a lot better. But in your opinion, what tinkering would you do going forward? Because it feels like more changes are inevitably going to be made.
Yeah, honestly, I wish we could get to a system and stick with it instead of changing the format every couple of years. I mean, can you imagine, say, with the NFL playoffs, if we went to 8 teams one year, then we're going to go to 10, and then it just keeps changing every year. I mean, when they went from 6 to 7, that was a huge deal. The NBA, adding the play-in, that was a big deal. But by and large, other leagues don't tinker with the postseason frequently, like college football appears to be doing and has been doing. I'm fine with the current format. I think it's pretty good. I think we've had 2 really good playoffs with great games, especially. It was the semis and quarters last year. We had some great first round games this year. So I think that fine right now. If you wanted to go to 16 and late the buys, I would be fine with that. I don't know how I feel about the big proposal of going to 24. That feels like we're going to dilute the product a little bit at that point, and regular season games not going to matter nearly as much as they do now. And I think the one thing I like about 12 versus 4 is that we were getting to a point in the 4-team playoff era where it's like 7 places had reason to follow the playoff after like October. It was always, Tuscaloosa, Athens, Columbus, Norman, Austin, Eugene, and then everybody else was out of it. And now you have a lot of different random teams playing meaningful games in November. And I think that's great for college football. So games at UC all of a sudden could be big. We saw, we've seen Iowa State play meaningful games in November. So I just think having more teams in the mix in November is good for college football, kind of de-regionalizes it a little bit. If you went to 16, fine. If you go to 24 or whatever, but let's get some stability in the product, because right now it just feels like it is so day to day and year to year, from the playoff format to how we're going to deal with enforcement and these NIL contracts and eligibility. So college football is great, but it's also a mess too. And the fact that we can't get any type of continuity in the playoff on a long-term scale, I think is part of it.
Yeah. I've kind of shifted my take on this a little bit. At 12 teams, I was fine with one group of 5 team getting in. My thought process was week 1 of the college football season, make every Division I athlete feel like they have a chance to win the title. And I've kind of shifted my take a little bit on this. I think the problem was two of those teams got in with James Madison and Tulane, and both of those games obviously were not good. Where are you with the little guy getting in? Are you all right with one getting in? But it kind of felt like two was a bit too much, especially in only 12 teams.
Yeah, no, I think that we should have a group of 5 team in the mix. I'm all for inclusivity in college football.
Okay.
And again, it kind of got to that point where so few teams were playing meaningful games, and that included the group of 5. And so I think it's great now that the group of 5 has a path. I don't think we envisioned 2 group of 5 teams getting into the playoff like we had this year, but that's the ACC's fault for the way that they constructed their championship game. I think most years, especially with the ACC cleaning that up, you're going to have the one group of 5 team and not 2, because it was a shame that Notre Dame didn't get in. I felt like they deserved to be in the playoff, and I probably would have picked them to win the national championship had they gotten in.
Yeah, I totally agree. Notre Dame felt like, those 2 losses early in the year, I don't know. I didn't think it was necessarily fair that they got left out, but Miami, of course, made a heck of a run and played in the national title game. When you look at some of these top prospects in the NFL draft, I see a lot of Big Ten guys, right? And obviously the SEC hasn't been in the national title game since 2022, a couple of years now. Any reason why you think that's the case? Is it just purely funding in some of these Big Ten schools, or any other reason why you're kind of seeing a shift in the dominance as far as the top of college football being more Big Ten than SEC?
I think part of it is the big programs in the Big Ten are on a roll or have been on a roll. Michigan, despite all the problems off the field, under Harbaugh, really rose back to prominence. Ohio State has been an absolute machine under Ryan Day. Top 2 or 3 recruiting classes every year, getting prominent transfers like Caleb Downs to come in. They've had continuity on the coaching staff, even though they've had some of the coordinators come and go. So I think that is part of it. The other part of it too is with the Big Ten programs being able to spend on the table. I think that there's a lot of money, and these Big Ten schools have enormous alumni bases. I mean, even Indiana has one of, I think, maybe even the biggest in the country. So when you have that type of population to pull from, for resources that are going to directly net you players, I think that's why you've seen, in part, the Big Ten dominating the national championship game, and the SEC, coming back to earth a little bit. There's always going to be more parity when you have schools that can spend money to go get players. Alabama can't buy everybody in the NIL era, so I think that's part of it, but also just these Big Ten programs, they have it together right now. And that's why you've seen, Ohio State, even though they lost to Miami, they were the favorite going into the playoff despite their seeding, losing to Indiana. And I think that you're going to continue to see the Big Ten, really flex on the national stage relative to the SEC. I mean, Oregon is loaded again. Ohio State is loaded again. I think Michigan with Bryce Underwood has got some potential to make some noise. We'll see what happens with Matt Campbell. Penn State, USC's got the number 1 recruiting class on the way there with Lincoln Riley. So there's a lot of, rightfully so, optimism for the Big Ten, not just long term, but also in 2026, where you're going to see a lot of potential playoff teams, I think, out of the conference.
I've kind of buried the lead a little bit here. News broke yesterday that Cincinnati is suing former quarterback Brendan Sorsby over $1 million exit fee. Do you have any more details on that at this point, or any idea how you think it's going to shake out in court?
Yeah, nothing beyond what our Mark Schlabach reported. Yeah. Basically overnight. This news came out last night and kind of floated into the morning. Listen, this is just one of many cases we're going to see where eligibility and the ability to transfer is going to be settled in the courts, because we have no system of enforcement in place. So, in the NFL, if there's a contract breach, you have, you have the NFL and you have the NFLPA to fall back on. We don't have that in college football. So your recourse is to sue. And it's not going to be the last lawsuit we see until college football comes up with a CBA that brings everybody to the table and everybody agrees to rules that are enforceable, which right now is not in place at all. And um, I haven't seen this particular contract, but in the NFL, you have access to all the contracts. There is agents, have to, be licensed and registered, and who they represent. In college sports, it's just all over the place right now. And again, this is UC's. If they felt like they were wronged, this is their only recourse right now because there basically are no rules when it comes to this.
Jake Trotter, ESPN, joining us for a couple more minutes live here on the show. I want to ask you a couple of Cleveland Browns questions here. Todd Monken is the new head coach in Cleveland. I think pretty clear that if you would ask Cleveland who their top 5 guys were going into the search, he would not have been one of them. I think it's maybe fair to say that a lot of people didn't necessarily want that Cleveland Brown job. What was your takeaway? I think it definitely could have been worse, but when you look at kind of his background, he's had success, but obviously not as a head coach in the National Football League and a little bit older than some of the new guys getting hired. What was your take on the Todd Monken decision?
Yeah, I think for the fan base and even some people in the media, that's probably where there was a lack of enthusiasm about the hire comes from. If he'd been 35 years old or one of these hot shot, up and coming coordinators, then I think, people might have felt differently initially. But I mean, the fact of the matter is the Browns got a really good coach who has won at a lot of different places, different levels. And the thing I really like about Todd for Cleveland is, he just has a different style than what they've had recently. He's not going to be afraid to say what he thinks, both in the locker room to the players and then, to the media as well. Like he's a straight shooter. And I think that, he has a chance to take this in the right direction. This is a job he's been waiting for his entire career. And I'm not saying that Todd Monken is Curt Cignetti, but we've seen, I don't know that Indiana fans were fired up about a 60-year-old JMU coach arriving. And then, 2 years later, they won a national championship. So just because you're later on in your career doesn't mean you can't coach. And, Todd Monken has had some great offenses over the years. That first iteration under Lamar where he won MVP, national championship at Georgia. I remember when he was the offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State and they came a missed field goal in Ames, Iowa away from playing for the national championship against, I guess it would have been LSU that year. And I think they probably would have won it like that he was the OC then. So, I think that he is an opportunity to really help Shador if they go that direction at quarterback. Listen, the offense, the offense has a lot of work. They might have 5 new starters on the offensive line. It's almost unprecedented in modern football. They've got to get more playmakers out there. And I think you're going to see them lean heavily toward the offense in the draft. But, as far as Todd Monken, I think that he's a good coach, and I'm excited to see what he can do with a Browns team that has been so poor offensively. If they can just be like mediocre with that defense, they could be a team that, maybe we're in December and they still have a path to the playoff. I don't think that's like completely unthinkable, given how dominant that defense has been and I think will be again.
Andrew Berry, the GM's interesting, has been in place for several years now. You look at the scope of the entire draft last year, and it was a really good draft, but obviously the 2 quarterbacks, that was a little weird. I know a lot of people had Gabriel as kind of a UDFA, and they took him in the 3rd round. There was a lot of discourse around this time last year, or I guess after they made the Shador pick, that Jimmy Haslam, the owner, was the guy that wanted Shador Sanders. What's your take on that situation, being around the team? Was that an Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski decision, or was that Jimmy Haslam saying, oh, it's the 5th round, he's still out there, let's go get him?
No, I mean, I think going into the draft, the plan was to take Dylan Gabriel. That was reflected in how high they took him. I mean, I think that was kind of a stunner that they went that high. But, in asking around about it after the fact, like they had targeted Dylan Gabriel really early on, and that was both Kevin and Andrew, who, really liked his potential as a pro quarterback. And I don't think they've given up on him, despite some of the up and downs last season and the fact that they have Shador on the roster. I think with Shador, based on what I've heard, I mean, that was Andrew's call. Like he felt like the value was there in the 5th round for a guy that a lot of people, were projected to go maybe in the 2nd, maybe some point day 2, maybe not as high as some people in the media had projected, like number 2 overall. But I think the Andrew Berry felt like the value was there, and I'm sure he consulted with Jimmy. But to my understanding, this was not Jimmy coming in and saying, we all let Johnny Manziel, we got to come in and take this guy for whatever reason. This was, I think Andrew looking at the value of the player given where he was in the rounds, in day 3, 5th round pick, and felt like it was worth taking a shot on in there. And he might be proven right. I mean, listen, Shador really struggled last year. The numbers are very ugly, but there were some moments where you felt like, okay, this is interesting. This is worth maybe giving him another look. And I think that's why they're not going to take a quarterback. I mean, I could be wrong, but why don't envision them drafting a quarterback this time around? I think they're going to see what they have in Shador. We'll see if something pops up in a trade in free agency now with Monken there. But listen, Todd Monken was interested in Shador coming out of the draft last year. As ESPN later reported, I think it was Schefter had it. The Ravens tried to draft Shador, and he turned them down. And when Todd first got to the building in Berea, Ohio, that was one of the first things he said to Shador is, "We tried to draft you. We'll have to talk about what happened there." So yeah, we'll see what happens with the draft. I think that for the Browns, you've got to get some help at offensive tackle. It was just such a disaster last year, and there's some good ones in this draft, whether early on in the 1st round or later on. Maybe in round 1, we'll see Monroe Feeling, Maioga, Spencer Fano. I mean, there's some intrigue. And then later on, Isaiah World from Oregon.
Yeah.
He was an absolute tower coming off an ACL injury, but this would be a long-term pick. And I think they've got to upgrade the receiver position, whether that's, Carnell Tate at number 6. I really like Mekhi Lemon. He kind of has that JSN,
Yep.
Jackson Smith and Jigba mode. And then, Denzel Boston from Washington, an X that can just go up and get the ball. Whatever they do, they've got to get something, because right now receiver is just in pretty bad shape.
Is there a world where Deshaun Watson's the starter in week 1? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think it's possible. The guy has not played a full season since 2020 now? Yeah. I think we're all the way back to 2020. He's either been suspended, sat out, or has suffered season-ending injuries in every year since. It's just hard to envision him getting to a kind of level where you want to give him a shot, because this is not a team necessarily trying to win a Super Bowl now. They're trying to develop potential franchise quarterbacks. So unless Deshaun Watson looks incredible in training camp and in the offseason, I don't think that's the direction they would go. But you can't rule it out, because the guy, when he was playing well, was one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks in the NFL. And you might as well see if there's anything to that. I'm not optimistic, and I think this is all kind of pointing toward giving Shador a shot again and seeing what he can do before then deciding, all right, now it's time to draft our franchise quarterback in 2027.
Gotcha. Makes sense. All right. Great stuff, Jake. Appreciate you. Tell everybody where we can find you on social media, and if there's anything you got coming up at ESPN that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, you can, I don't know. You can find me on social media. What's it called? X now, but
yeah,
just ESPN.com, the college football page. Got a lot of, got some draft stories I'm working on, and then obviously some spring stories as well. And I'll be interested to see what the Reds lineup looks like here in a month or 2.
Yeah, there we go. You and me both. Well, Jake, I appreciate it, man. Thanks so much, and would love to do it again sometime, my friend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Jake Trotter, ESPN. Great stuff from him, senior college football writer. Also around the Cleveland Browns organization there as well, doing great work at ESPN. We appreciate the heck out of him making some time for us here on a Thursday. Guess there's a world where Deshaun Watson is the starter in week 1. I agree. Totally think Shador is going to be the route in which they go. But that would be crazy if Deshaun Watson was back out there as the starter for the Cleveland Browns. But appreciate Jake. That interview will be out later on our YouTube page. And check that out if you missed any parts of that conversation. Jake Trotter, ESPN. All right, what we got here? Jets, Titans. Oh, yeah, they made a trade this morning. Jermaine Johnson is going to Tennessee. Tavondre Sweat is going to the New York Jets. So Sweat was a second-round pick out of Texas, younger player, still on his rookie deal. The Jets continue to just blow this thing up, right? Another first-round pick that they're moving off of. Jermaine Johnson was a first-round pick, played a couple of years at Georgia, played his final year at Florida State, was ACC Player of the Year, took him at like 27, mid-20s, high 20s, something like that. Has it panned out as far as a top 30 pick in the NFL draft? Maybe not, but clearly he's got some juice. Clearly he's got some upside. And I think it's fair to say, kind of what we were talking about with J.J. Bleday and the A's, like if you're evaluating a guy on the Jets, it's like, well, let's give him another shot somewhere else and really see what type of football player that he is. But Bob Saleh comes in, Titans head coach, defensive-minded guy, obviously an elite coordinator with the Niners, and clearly he wants to beef up that defensive line, which needs a lot of help. It is Jeffrey Simmons and not much else going on there. And he gets a guy that he coached in New York in Jermaine Johnson, and he's going to be playing under that fifth-year option deal. So it's only a one-year situation. So if you're looking at this this trade, and you're going, Tavondre Sweat for Jermaine Johnson, what the heck? The Titans only have him for 1 year, right? And Sweat still has much more team control than that, who, by the way, I think has been a solid player. Second-round guy, right? Nothing crazy, but I think he's played some solid football, and I understand the move from the Jets, but also it's hard to imagine them being competitive ever, one, with that ownership group and Aaron Glenn and those guys, but certainly in the short term in 2026. So I think the reason why I bring this up and the reason why it could potentially impact the Cincinnati Bengals is Titans pick at 4, right? Browns, we were just talking to Jake Trotter, they're at 6, but I think it was kind of a foregone conclusion that, David Bailey, Reuben Bain, one of those guys is going to Tennessee. Not to say that this trade means that's not going to happen, but I do think the chances of Carnell Tate going 4 to Tennessee increased this morning with this trade, right? I think Robert Saleh, again, they only have Johnson for a year. Simmons, and he's not an aging player, but he's been around the block a little bit. Bringing in your pass rusher of the future probably is still the right call. But now that you address that need and you have it in the short term here in Jermaine Johnson, you could sit there and look around and say, you know what? Cam Ward, a guy that, Bob Saleh took this job because of Cam Ward. Brian Daboll took this job because of Cam Ward. And I was high on Cam Ward when he got drafted, but, he played in Tennessee, and it was kind of a dumpster fire, and he didn't really do much as a rookie. But I think you saw Chicago do this when you have a quarterback that you believe in. You try to help him out on offense. What did Chicago do? Look at all the receivers they drafted. They bring in, obviously DJ Moore. They draft Luther Burden. They draft Roma Dunze. They draft Colston Loveland, so they really put pieces around Caleb Williams. And if you're the Titans, might not be the worst idea to just put some guys around him. You got a stud OC in Daboll and see what he can do. So I would understand for Carnell Tate to the Titans there at that point in the draft, which would be great for the Cincinnati Bengals. As we continue to say, right, Jake Trotter was just talking about the Browns. Take a tackle. Take one of them. Take a receiver if you want. Right? You want to get aggressive, go Mekhi Lemon at 7 or at 6. That's fine. Do it. Take as many offensive players off the board before Cincinnati's picking at 10, which allows them to get potentially a Reuben Bain, David Bailey, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs, a player of that caliber. And that'll be interesting. But move that the Titans made, being aggressive there. Their GM, Borgonzi, won't become official till the start of the league year in a couple of weeks, but they made an aggressive move. Cincinnati obviously has not done something like that. Would I have given up Demetrius Knight for Jermaine Johnson? Yes, I would have. But I don't think the New York Jets probably would have made that move, to be completely honest with you. A couple of more. The Panthers, by the way, are listening to offers for Andy Dalton, which I'm happy for Bryce Young. I was banging the table like, yeah, you should be the number 1 overall pick. Then C.J. Stroud made that look pretty insane the rookie year, and now all of a sudden you look back at it and go, you know what? Carolina may have made the right decision. over C.J. Stroud, if we're being completely honest. But this Bryce Young, a number 1 overall pick that they gave up, a ton to get to that spot and draft him in the Chicago trade. Just mentioned DJ Moore. Clearly not, but he's earned himself to be the starter this coming year. He's not going to get an extension or anything crazy, but took his team to the playoffs, albeit not a good record at all, but has an opportunity here to be the starter in the short term. He's their guy in 26. I think having Andy Dalton in that room has really benefited him. Say what you want about Andy Dalton, but as far as just a guy that's, has a lot of experience and just helping him kind of as a veteran presence, mentor type of figure, clearly has done a great job. Bryce has spoken highly of him. But if you're Carolina, you're going, well, we just made the playoffs, but we can't bank on going 8-9 again or whatever the heck it was and getting back in the playoffs. We got to win some more games, and maybe we can get an asset for a backup quarterback. And I think that's something that's going a little bit under-discussed in the NFL to this point, because there's some guys that are on NFL rosters who are backup quarterbacks, and in a year in a draft where it's like, yeah, maybe Ty Simpson's a first-round pick, but beyond that, it's a whole lot of nothing, obviously, besides Mendoza. I think you're going to see some of these teams in need of a quarterback be calling, right? Calling San Francisco, hey, Mac Jones, what's going on there? What do you need for him? Calling Philadelphia, McKee, hey, what you need for him, right? Calling Chicago, hey, Tyson Bagent, what you need? I think you're going to see that a little bit more, and apparently Andy Dalton has entered that conversation as well. For the Bengals, do you trade for him? No, right? So we could do a video on that. We did that, I remember, when Burrow got hurt. Maybe we'll do that video again just to get some traction. But the Bengals aren't bringing him back. Would it be a fun story? Maybe, but, that doesn't need to happen, right? Get Joe Flacco back, or a Case Keenum, or a veteran-type guy that can back up Joe Burrow and go from there. But it doesn't need to be Andy Dalton. Interesting, however, that the Panthers are fielding some calls. And real quickly on the Chicago Bears, before we get out of here on today's show, there's been some reports that, Chicago, the Bears, they're leaving Chicago. And I remember I first saw it. It's like, they're going to Indiana. And, I'm familiar with how the United States is set up, but just the thought of like Chicago to Indiana seems like a crazy amount, despite the fact they're neighboring states, of course, but you look it up and it's like 40 minutes or so it's really not that crazy. But if you're the NFL, right, I know the Bears have stunk for a really long time. Obviously, they did not stink this past year. But that's an organization where it's kind of a cornerstone organization in the National Football League. Is it the Niners, Packers, or Steelers? No, but it's kind of that next tier a little bit. And Kansas City, smallest market team, right there with Cincinnati, Jacksonville, teams like that, they make the jump across the border. I don't really think that's that big of a deal, right? Going right across the border, moving their stadium a little bit. I'd be disappointed if I was a Chiefs fan that you're not going to be in Arrowhead anymore. But as far as leaving the city of Chicago, right, if I'm the NFL, I'm doing whatever I can to get involved here in this situation and make sure that does not happen. Because to me, right, you want to be in a big city like that. Chicago is one of the biggest, proudest, cities in this great country that we live in. The Chicago Bears need to be playing football in Chicago, right? You need to move your stadium a little bit, not be Soldier Field, redo it, whatever the heck you got to do. That's fine. But you don't need to be moving to Indiana, right? Again, they're not moving to Indianapolis, right? The Colts are there. They're not moving, eastern Indiana. It's just kind of there on the border, 40-minute drive-ish, something like that. But the league needs to get involved here and say, you know what, we need to make sure that the Bears stay here. Because that's the last thing you want to do is these teams that are jumping from cities. I mean, look at these fan bases, right? Look at the Chargers and the Rams, right? Nobody even cares to show up to SoFi Stadium and cheer on those teams, right? You just got celebrities and random people showing up to those games. They don't have a fan base, right? Vegas is starting to do a little bit better with the Raiders, but, they were horrible in Oakland, but there was still a loyal following, and then they moved to Vegas, and for a while it's like, well, now the team stinks, and then all your loyal fans are in Oakland. Well, you're kind of in a tough spot. We don't need to see a move like this for the Chicago Bears. If you're the NFL, get involved. Do whatever you can to stay in the city of Chicago. But that'll do it for this edition of the show. Appreciate everyone, as always, for tuning in. Reds baseball, they play in a couple of hours. Chase Burns gets the ball again, 3:05 first pitch. Bit of a win streak here in spring. Back-to-back wins for Cincinnati. One-run wins, right? That'd be nice if that could continue into the regular season, but exciting stuff going on with the Reds. Miami not in action tonight, back in action tomorrow. We'll see if we can get another guest. Certainly appreciate Jake Trotter, ESPN, stopping by. Great stuff from him on college football and a little on the Cleveland Browns, Bengals rival, of course, in the AFC North. That interview will be out on YouTube later today if you missed it. But appreciate everyone, as always, for tuning in. Until tomorrow, take care, everybody.